mean, I was scheduled at 9, and I know you want to party. You don't want to listen to a serious speech. But please let me start. I'll try to make it very brief. May I begin by addressing my elders, the chiefs, and the friends of the Stein. And I want to tell you that my name is Nuchi. It means mountain, and it was given to me by Chief Simon Lucas of the Nuchanuth, and I'm proud to wear that name. It's wonderful to see you all here. Your presence gives me strength, and it gives me hope. And I wish that I had learned from my many friends like Rob Robinson to speak from my heart. Unfortunately, I'm still one of those that has to read from my notes. But by your presence here and by the sounds I hear, you are telling the people, not only in British Columbia and Canada, but the world, that the Stein will stay forever. It will never be cut. We are here for a celebration of one of the unique treasures on this planet. But I think you've also come to this place for this weekend in such numbers because we are all concerned. Something is wrong. The planet is in trouble, and we know that the trouble is us. We are here to state our concern, to put our bodies on the line, to support the fight, to save this earth and to find alternatives to the destructive path that we're on. This year is the 20th anniversary of the first landing on the moon, and you've heard all of the media excitement over this to celebrate the anniversary of that event. And what are we celebrating? Not the experiments that were performed on the moon, the rocks that were brought back from the moon, the triumph of science and technology. What those astronauts did 20 years ago was that they gave us a picture of our home, Mother Earth. They gave us a picture of this planet that showed that it is a single system. You don't see any of the divisions, the colored dividing lines between Canada and the United States and the provinces. It is one system. But in the 20 years since those rockets went to the moon, we've had other reminders that we live in a single system. The dioxin spill in Seveso, Italy. The chemical spill that sterilized the Rhine River. Cadmium, lead, and arsenic poisoning. PCBs in Inuit people. Bhopal, the Valdez spill. They are all trying to tell us one thing. And when the fire broke out in Chernobyl, within minutes, radioactive material was detected over Sweden. Within hours, radioisotopes had spread all over the Arctic, and within a day, they were falling over northern Canada. What was that telling you? That air doesn't end at national borders. We don't carry a little pocket of air around our heads that's ours. The air that we breathe in Canada was once air that was over the Soviet Union or over Brazil or over China or Africa. We live in one system and we share it with not only all people but all living creatures on the planet. The world isn't infinite, it's finite. The water that we drink here in this valley was once water that was in Russia. It was once water in the Brazilian rainforest. It was once water in the oceans. You all know the cycle of water. It evaporates, becomes clouds, it rains, it runs into the rivers and lakes and oceans, evaporates, it cartwheels around the planet. The water is finite and it's shared by all living organisms, and it's the same with food. What food do you eat for your nutrition that wasn't once a living plant or animal? Nothing. Everything that you eat to keep you alive was once a living plant or animal. We are made up of atoms and molecules that were once a part of life around the planet. We are a compost heap for future life on this earth. We are connected to all other living creatures on this earth, as native people have been telling us ever since we came into contact with them. And today, as our astronauts fly into outer space, the pictures they send back to us are horrifying. In the 20 years since the first men went to the moon, the planet is showing signs that it is sick. From space, 7,000 fires can be seen burning in the Amazon rainforest on any given night. From space, we see vast tracts in Canada of clear cutting, of damming, of the formation of deserts, of cities and oil slicks on the ocean.
It has something else.
For the first time in the history of life on Earth, one species, us, is bringing about radical changes that could bring all forms of life down. And you know what one of the problems is? We've always lived in a world where our eyes and our ears and our tongues and our noses could tell us if there was danger, could warn us that something is wrong. But today, the dangers that face us, we can't see them, we can't smell them, we can't taste them. They're radiation in the water and the air. They're a gradual accumulation of carbon dioxide and CFCs in the upper atmosphere. They're PCBs and dioxin and pesticides in our water and our food. We are changing the planet, but our bodies no longer tell us that there's anything wrong. For the past 4 months, I've been involved in a radio series called It's a Matter of Survival. And in those 4 months, I've traveled around the world. I've interviewed over 120 scientists. And although I've been talking about environmental problems for over 25 years, in those 4 months I was horrified to find that scientists around the world are unanimous. The planet is sick, the signs are incontrovertible, and we have less than 10 years to make the decisions to turn it around. What are those signs? We are now the most numerous, the most widespread large mammal on this planet. All of those vast herds of animals we used to see in Africa, there are more of us than any of those. We now number 5.2 billion. And every year, 90 million new human beings are added to the population. That's 3 times the population of Canada. Every 3 years, we add the equivalent of the United States. Every 10 years, the equivalent of China. And every new body is a new set of lungs to fill with air, a new stomach to fill with food, a new body to clothe and house. We are putting an enormous strain on this planet. And at the same time, every year, 25 billion tons of agricultural topsoil wash away. That's the equivalent of the entire wheat growing capacity of Australia being lost every year. Every 10 years, 7% of agricultural food topsoil is lost. Since 1984, total world food production has been dropping every year. At the very time human populations are exploding, that simply cannot go on without a radical crisis. Every second, 1 acre of tropical rainforest disappears forever. And every year, over 20,000 species of plants and animals go down the drain with those rainforests. What do we do? I'll get to that in a minute. Every 5 minutes, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, a major shipment of toxic chemicals crosses a national border. Much of it to be disposed illicitly in the oceans, on soil, much of it in third world countries like along the West African coast and in Canada. We add to that as well the numerous effects of our numbers and our technology on the atmosphere, the loss of the ozone layer, acidification of the air, and the greenhouse gases, and you're courting disaster. There is no controversy over greenhouse warming. The only question is how fast and how much is it going to take place. And let me tell you, for those who argue, is it coming or isn't it? I don't think it's surprising that the last year was the hottest summer ever in record. And the year before that was the second hottest summer on record. And the 5 hottest summers ever recorded were all in the 1980s. The greenhouse effect is happening. The results are going to be disastrous. But the question is, what has gone wrong? The great boast of our species was that we always could see ahead, and we could choose a path that would lead to greater probability that we would survive. But we no longer seem able to do it, and why? I believe that one problem is that we have forgotten that we are animals. Not those guys that you meet down on Davie Street or in a pub. I mean, we are animals like any other animal species. We have come to believe that we are like no other creatures. We're so smart, we can control and manage the entire world. Our experts in forestry tell us that those clear cuts up there, the use of chemical pesticides and herbicides, are wise forestry management. That if they cut the Stein, they'll regrow the likes of what they've cut down. And I will tell you that what they will grow is a grotesque shadow of what they replaced. Because a forest is a living organism. A forest isn't just a collection of trees. A forest is the air that comes out of that land. A forest is the water. It's the soil with all of the microorganisms in it. It's the wildlife, and yes, it's trees. But that whole system is a forest. And that's not what forestry is interested in managing at all. Our ignorance and our arrogance is compounded by our overriding concern today with jobs and profit. In British Columbia, the loggers and the foresters tell us that natives and environmentalists are destroying jobs. Yet at the very time, the increase that is going on in profits per year, the increase in allowable cuts that's going on, is accompanied by a loss of jobs. Why? It's not the environmentalists and the natives. What it is it's the machines. It's the automation. It's the multinational corporations. It's the companies that are mining the forests. They're hydrating, they're wasting, they're destroying fish and wildlife habitat. They're shipping raw logs out of here in the name of maximizing short-term profit. Those are the enemies of loggers, not environmentalists and natives. This simply cannot be allowed to go on. We are here to speak, and you've already shown with your voices that this destructiveness must stop. And it means that we have to, as Canadians, set an example. Now, I remember last year at the Stein Festival when one young man got up and criticized the festival for having styrofoam cups. And he was ridiculed on the stage of the Stein Festival as being irrelevant to that stage, and that young man was not irrelevant. What he was trying to tell us was, it's not going to be easy. And we're here to save the Stein, yes, but we're here to change as well. And the styrofoam cups that you see all through here are an example of what we've got to change. We are part of the problem, and you can't avoid that. It means that we do have to walk, and we do have to take the bike instead of jumping in the car. It means that we do have to take public transit. It means that we do have to have recycling. It's a scandal that in all of Canada, only 10 newspapers use recycled paper, and the only major one is, of all things, the Toronto Sun. All of the others are local, tiny newspapers. The vast bulk of recycled newspaper in Canada goes to the United States. It's unacceptable. Every community now must be on a crash program to recycle 60 and 70% of its material within the next 5 years. We've got to press for that. And it means shit disturbing. You've got to go into restaurants, go into the hardware stores, go into the supermarkets, and tell people we don't want that packaging and that waste. We've got to be at the forefront of that change. It means joining environmental groups, supporting groups with your bodies and your money. It means taking our votes much more seriously. We have to green politics regardless of what party we're talking about. Demand environmental programs. Every candidate for office must be able to articulate an environmental program just as much as he must read and add. And we must demand action, not words, and remember their track record. Don't let them get away with the words. Look at what they do, not what they say. We want leadership and we want action. And you know something? We represent a part of the 20% of the privileged world that's using over 80% of its resources and making out the vast bulk of its toxic materials. And we have to set an example for the 80% of the world that is left with 20%. And yet, you know something? I've heard the word sustainable development used here a lot. But if you hear what Canadian politicians and Canadian business people are saying, you listen. It's not sustainable development. They're talking about sustainable growth. They want to sustain their profits. They don't want to give anything up. And I'm saying, folks, we already got enough. We don't need any more growth. We've got to make do with less. And the reason is that there is 80% of the world out there saying, you guys have made all of this problem. You guys are living high on the hog, and we want what you've got. And don't tell us not to do what you've done. You've created the problem. Now get out of our way. And if we care about this planet, we have to set an example and cut back. We have to help those people, educate them, and pay so that they don't make the same silly mistakes that we have. But you know, we have to ask ourselves some fundamental questions. If you ask any politician today, why did you go in, any politician, why did you go into politics? What does your government want to do? My bet is the overwhelming majority of them will say, we are trying to do everything we can to make sure that Canada has its share of the global economic marketplace. We must have steady growth in the economy every year. Growth has become the very criterion whereby we define progress. If we didn't grow economically, we say we've had a recession. We've had an economic failure. We've got a crisis, a depression. Growth and progress are equated together. But you know something? You talk. One thing that Native people taught me right away. Talk to your elders. I'm not talking about Native elders. Talk to your non-Native elders. Talk to anyone who's lived in Canada for longer than 60 or 70 years. And ask them what Canada was like when they were 10 years old. And they will describe a world that is radically different and unrecognizable. They are a living record of the change that's happened in the span of a single human life. And you hear a lot of people say that's the price of progress, and I would say that ain't progress at all. And we better look at that and say, what kind of progress do we want? I think we have a twofold challenge, and I'll just give that to you and I'll quit. I think we have to face the fact that we are the last generation now that has any choice to make about wilderness at all. Biologists estimate at the rate we are going, British Columbia will have no loggable old-growth forest within less than 15 years. That around the world, the vast tracts of wilderness will essentially all be gone, but for 4 tracts by the end of this century, They will be in New Guinea, in Borneo. They will be in one tract in South America and one in Africa, and that's all that's left. In 30 years, there will be no wilderness left anywhere on this planet. We are the last generation that will make those decisions. We have to fight then to save every bit of wilderness that's left as a legacy for our children, as a hedge against our ignorance. The battle is important just to keep the vast history and the biological legacy that resides in that wilderness area. But just as important, if we decide not to touch an area like that, it makes us ask, why did we do it? Why do we value that? Where the heck are we going? We must think about the path that we face in the coming years. But in the long run, we must undergo a fundamental shift in human attitude and spirit. We need a new spiritual vision of our place in the natural world. You know, most of us who are here live in cities and towns. We live in a world that has been managed and created by us. And we newcomers to this rich land, we whose ancestors came here in the last 500 years, are radically disconnected from the earth. We look at land as property, as potential wealth. We buy and we sell and we move away. We dig into the earth, we clear the forests, we dam the waters, and we move on. We need to learn a radically different relationship with the earth and to rediscover our connections with all other living beings. When Ruby Dunstan said at the Stein Festival last year, if you put a road into that valley, if you cut those trees, it would be like taking my people and lining them up and shooting them with a gun. She was telling us something very profound. She was telling us that to Native people, land is not just a commodity you trade in so lightly. That land embodies their history, their culture, their being, their identity, their very purpose. And Gujao, the Haida drummer who drummed me in here tonight, Gujao turned my life around when he said very simply, if you cut the trees in Haida Gwaii, if you kill the fish, if you spoil the rivers, then we Haida people will be just like everybody else. That is a very profound statement of a native perception of where they fit on this planet. And as a parent, I'm concerned with what I'm leaving, my generation is leaving to my children. I have so much I feel that I have to learn from native perspectives. And as we all realize the extent of the environmental crisis, we need desperately, more desperately than ever, that wisdom that comes from indigenous perceptions all around the planet. And now each time we lose one of those pieces of land that belongs to native people, we lose another possible link between us and nature that we need to get over the path that we're on. If you care about this planet, if you worry about your children's future, you must support native land claims with all your strength and all your passion, because there lies our way out of this mess that we're in. If native people win, everyone wins. Thank you.